I was raised really strict fundamentalist Christian. My family is all very Christian. So I had an upbringing where, it was like one way to God, one way or the highway kind of mentality. It was very closed-minded. And I always felt like there was something more. I remember the first spiritual experience that I had was when my cat Oscar died. And he came to me in my dream and he said, I wanted to say goodbye and let you know that it's my time. And then that was the end of the dream. I woke up to my mother shaking me awake and saying, I just wanted to let you know Oscar died. And I remember not feeling sad at all. And I'm a very emotional person. So I get sad. I feel all the feels. And in this instant, I must have been like 10, 11. And I just said, oh, okay, well, he just told me. And it was almost like I had that closure, this understanding. So there was no space for sadness because I understood because he came and told me. And I don't quite remember my mom's reaction, but she was kind of like, oh, and then I didn't shed a tear because it felt like there was a completion of life and I got the memo. And it was this really beautiful moment that I had with my cat as he was passing. And that was probably the most spiritual thing that I had in my childhood. I think a lot because anything that was not religious through the lens of Christianity was really dimmed down, although that's not true. I had a couple experiences where people in my youth would come to me when they felt like they had psychic attachments and energies attached into their field, and they were coming to me for help. And I remember going to the pastor at one point to ask him about, like, what do you think about possession or entities attaching to individuals? And I remember the pastor just got really anxious. He got really awkward. He ended up kicking my friend's father off of the team of elders and the council because I was coming about one of their children who had come to me. And I had a couple different people that came to me. And I remember I was sort of the collector of the wounded individuals that felt like they had something that was connected to their energy field and they just didn't know what to do with that or where to go for it. And so now I understand that as that's one of the gifts that I work with clients with. But as a kid, I had no way of really knowing how to help people. I didn't have the training. I didn't have the experiences, but I remember seeking that out within the lens of Christianity. And I just, the pastor he just shut down. He didn't have any answers. Everything that wasn't understood through the context of what we knew in religion was just sort of shut down and cast out as evil, So I had a background that had a lot of that, especially with my parents, my sister, very fundamentalist, very evangelical background.
Well, I know a lot of my viewers will be able to relate with that, being raised in such a strict fundamentalist environment. And it's so interesting that those friends of yours were drawn to you for help with the entities and the possessions. Even though you weren't consciously aware that that was one of your gifts, they must have been able to sense it in your energy. Or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And it makes so much sense now because I have the tools for it. But at that time, I didn't know how to help them. So I just brought them to youth group with me. I was like, come to church with me and we're going to find a way. But there were no answers within that context, which was really frustrating because I thought, we talk about demons in the Bible and how entities can attach. And now I have a deeper understanding of how that happens through the lens of the work that I've done with clients, through my own personal experience. But there just wasn't the language for that. There wasn't a tolerance either. There was not a space that could be held. I remember one individual who I was trying to assist, they ended up sending her to a mental institution. And that was not helpful for her at the time. And it took years for her to say, I'm not sure if I even forgive you because I was part of the intervention group because that person was going to do harm unto themselves. And so I was doing whatever I had in my toolkit at that time. And now I understand that I know how to help people with those afflictions, but it's not through the lens of Christianity in the way that we see it. Although I do work with angels and I work with Jesus as guides to help with that. And that's just, a tiny little facet of the work that I do. But yes, it was happening in those realms. And I guess I take those for granted, those experiences. But through the lens that I was raised in, there wasn't a place to really help people or give them a language. We just sort of lock people away and say that they're crazy. When I really believe that people who are experiencing voices or having those spiritual experiences. We talk about the realm of schizophrenia, right? I truly believe that there is a spectrum, which we call mental illness, which can also be that spiritual openness where one can really have a lot of spiritual gifts, but there just is not that space in society to really hold for them or to initiate them through learning how to really connect with their true self and handle those energies and decipher what's theirs and what's not. So I'm sure you can relate to that as you're a helper of people who are connecting in with their consciousness, but that can come with a lot of layers.
Oh, very much so. And this is such a fascinating and important topic. And so, to the viewers, stick around because we'll come back to this when we talk to KRISTEN about her work. But first, I want to hear about your NDEs. And so, I'm curious, were you still a fundamentalist Christian when you had your first NDE?
No, I was not. So I had sort of a falling out with my family and Christianity, not so much Christianity, but with my family. Gosh, it's got to be about 15 years ago. And it's because I started to follow the path of shamanism and looking at my indigenous heritage. I have indigenous heritage within my ancestry. Yes, I'm a lot of German, but I'm also Native American as well. I have one of my 7 generations back. This is one of my ancestors here. She's actually halfway between me and Pocahontas, which I always knew when I was younger. I would look at that picture when I was growing up and say, who's that Indian lady? And I felt so called to this picture of one of my ancestors who was in our hallway. And my parents shared with us and me and my sister, my family, the family tree. And Pocahontas was 7 generations back. This ancestor here is about halfway through that lineage. And I always felt really connected to it. And it wasn't until I was in an unhappy marriage where I was living out all of the traumas of my childhood with my partner. We were both living out all of these childhood experiences that really were coming up for us because they needed to heal. And I truly believe that we attract people into our life in relationships so that we can mirror what work still needs to be done. And so God bless my ex-husband's heart. We came together to rile up all the ancestral stuff that needed to be worked on for both of us. And while I am a healer, I was able to support him with some of his work. It really poked at a lot of my biggest childhood wounds. My ex-husband was a lot like my mother. He had the same birthday as my mother. And then his mother had a similar birthday to my father, a couple days away. And then his mother was so much like my sister and my dad rolled into one. And so I was faced with all of these unresolved emotions, these wounds where I was not fully in my power because I was reverting to this wounded child archetype that he was just displaying in my life so that I could see it. And we went through a conscious decoupling, but that left me with a lot of wounds to sort out that I needed to work on myself. So I dug into my ancestry more. I always knew I was related to Pocahontas, didn't quite know the extent of how horrific her true story is. Not the Disney version at all, but truly it's like she was sex trafficked amongst some of these white settlers, and she was essentially taken from her family and shipped off to Europe to marry one of my ancestors. And I'm related to that like half colonizer, half indigenous lineage, which we call the Red Rolfs, because my ancestor was John Rolfe. And so I was looking at this ancestral story from the lens of Pocahontas' siblings who accompanied her on that trip and then were with her when she was murdered on her way back on the voyage back to see her family in the Chesapeake Bay, Virginia area. And when I was reading this book, it was like everything in me, my whole body was like, you have to go to these ancestral lands. And I love kayaking. My partner that I met, that I'm still with after my divorce, he was really into kayaking. And I just said, hey, do you want to go kayaking my ancestral waterways in Virginia? Let's make a trip out of it. And so we went, he accompanied me. He sort of stayed and did his own thing. He went fishing. I was doing prayers on the waterways, not exactly sure exactly what I was supposed to be doing there, other than I was there to intentionally and with prayer break some of these cycles that I was recognizing in this lineage. Looking and doing the research, I realized I was playing out all of these patterns in my lifetime. I could see them in my dad's lifetime, my sister's lifetime, and multiple generations back. And so I was there to be the breaker of the curse within the family. Whatever that meant, I just knew I needed to show up in prayer and with authenticity. And so I brought my rattles and I brought my plants and made some offerings to the land and to the water. And it was on the 5th day that I was kayaking, and this time, thank God, close to my partner, that I had an ovarian cyst. I didn't know I had. It ruptured. And when that happened, I went unconscious and I blacked out, but not before I blacked out did I see tunnel vision to the blue of the kayak and the blue of the river, and it sort of went sideways into the water. And so at that moment, the thought that I carried into the other side was, oh, I just died. Like, this is how I die. And I remember saying to him right before I went unconscious and into the water, something ruptured. I think I'm going to faint. And then that was it. I was transported to a completely different landscape. I was in the sky, but there was no traveling to the sky. I was just in this realm, which I call the land of lights and colors. It's the best way to describe it is being suspended in the air of a sunrise sunset it was like I could see myself hovering in it in the light, and then the rays of light were coming out from all of the angles behind me and around me, and it was the brightest colors I'd ever seen. It was the most loving, peaceful place, but I came in with some anxiety. I brought my human mind in, and the first thing that I saw after the light sort of dissipated into a face was the face very up close of my Native American ancestor, which I later realized was one of my first spirit guides. When I started to connect with my spirit guides and ancestors, he always called himself Chief. Well, Pocahontas, his father, was Chief Powhatan. And he was the chief of the Powhatans. And so I went to the Mattapony River. That's where this near-death experience happened. That was the land where those ancestors used to hang out, right? They would move around. They would go on the waterways. So they weren't in one exact location, but I went to their hub. And so I met this ancestor, and he was so chill, right? I came in, I'm dead. This is it, freaking out. And he just was so calm, but he was so excited to see me. But he held that peace and was very present. And I could see every single line in his face, just the love in his eyes. And the first thing he said to me, never forget, he says, "Don't worry, Kristen, you're not going to die today. You're here to be activated." And so with that, he went to reach out to touch my solar plexus. And I just felt all of my cells just light up into this like orgasmic bliss state. And I remember my arms going out to my sides and just feeling this move through my body. And then my Christian mindset came in and sort of tried to shut down what was happening. And I sort of went into this thought process of like, who is this random man who I'm now having this orgasmic experience with through the cells of my being turning into light? And I made this story, it was flashed, it was so quickly, this mindset that came in to make this evil or bad, because here I am, like, who's this man that I'm having this, and it's not like he was giving me anything, like a sexual experience, but that's all I can relate it to is just the feeling of the peak orgasm, but that charging my cells, but that coming from a source of light and love that had nothing to do with anything physical contact oriented or sexual in any way. But my mind came in and made it bad and put a shadow over the experience until the guides were there. And it's like they just kind of like smudged it away like smoke, just waving it out of my head space, and just said, "Don't do that. This is not what this is. Let that go. That has nothing to do with this experience here." And they sort of just waved it away. And I was able to dismiss that thought, almost like they were taking some of this Christian mentality and mindset and just pulling it out of me like a spider web that was stuck in my mind. And then I was able to really surrender to what they said was an activation and just feel it in my body and feel it in my cells. And there was a couple different downloads that I had, in the sense that there was no more words. And I'm not even sure if he spoke the words the whole time. It was this telepathic knowing and experience. I just knew what he was saying, and he knew what I was feeling. And I got all of these messages about, it's not your time. You need to go back and help people with their ancestral healing work. And this near-death experience came at a time where I really needed a kick in the butt and a wake-up call, because I was in this like licking of my own wounds state of sadness and inner turmoil. Because when you go through a divorce, I'm sure as people have gone through breakups, divorces in your community, it hurts and it shatters you. And it can be really hard to get yourself out of that space. And I have all these tools I help other people with, but sometimes you don't see the tools in front of your face because you're so wallowed in the sadness and the emotions and all of the childhood trauma and wounding that was also dropping me right into a pool of that I needed to clean up that mess. And it was this notion of like, you're taking too long to be stuck in this. We need you to get back to what you're here for. And here's a couple more layers of what you're here for that weren't on my periphery of what I was helping people with. They sort of added this new layer of ancestral work. And it makes sense because I always find them just like a couple of steps ahead of the people that I'm helping. And I know that because I'll go through something big in my life, a big divorce, a big unraveling, and then all of my clients after that are going and healing through divorce, right? And so I'm attracting the people that need the help because I have the capacity to know what it feels like and can be empathic in that, but come from an empowered place to help them. So the understanding and the support is there, but then also the tools are there and the guides always bring all the magic through, right? So it's not really anything I have, is just being that catalyst for what spirit wants to bring through for others or what their guides or ancestors want to bring. And so this message was timely and was this awakening that kind of kicked me back into my body. The next thing I saw was I was walking down a hallway, and down the hall to the left, there was a door to the left, there was a voice and it was calling me to come back. And honestly, the feeling that this was equivalent to felt like I was in like a DMT ceremony, right? I've done plant medicine ceremonies with indigenous folks all over the world. That's part of my studies that I've done. I've done work specifically with the toad medicine that is very, very cosmic. It produces DMT in the brain, and that's also produced when you're born and when you die. And so it makes sense that I thought I was going to be returning to this particular space in Brooklyn where I did a plant medicine ceremony over a decade ago. But instead, when I heard the voice and went to the source of it, it was my partner. And he was trying to get me to come back into my body. And so his words of come back were from him. And I opened my eyes. I saw the blue of the water, the blue of the kayak. And I was like, oh, I'm here. That's where I was. Oh, yeah. And all of this pain in my body was so overwhelming. I remember closing my eyes, going back to the land of lights and colors, was really trying to like reach out to be like, I want to hang out with my ancestors. And my partner was like, no, you're coming back to your body. And I remember sort of transitioning back and forth for a couple minutes of going back to that place and then being pulled and sucked back into my body where I was in so much incredible pain, could barely stay conscious, and was going through a very difficult bodily human experience that you just don't have on the other side. It's just bliss and love. So it was hard to want to leave that to come back to the hard part of being a human.
Can I be honest? I've spoken with hundreds of people since I first started my YouTube channel. Number one universal thing that people say to me is, why can't I feel divine presence, my guidance, my higher self, etc.? People want to feel something. They want inner transformation on the spiritual path. And yet most religions and spiritual paths fall short to provide this. When I speak to people, even those who are advanced meditators who have more experience meditating than I do, they all tell me the same thing. Nothing really works to give me that connection to divine love that I'm seeking. There are simple practices that you can do that can shift things radically in your internal space. And it takes time and it takes consistency, but it's not hard. And the vast majority of people don't know this and aren't doing this and then wonder why they can't connect to divine love. And this is why I started my one-on-one sessions, so that I can work with people, find out where you're at and exactly what you need. In my sessions, I not only work on your energy field, balancing your chakra system, enhancing your energy, providing energy work for any specific area of need, and giving you feedback on what I see in your energy field, I also send you away with simple, implementable, powerful practices to actually shift your state of consciousness, connect you to your divine nature, your connection to divine love, and be able to shift your consciousness on the internal plane to move away from suffering, attachment, and judgment into peace and flow and connection to divine love. Due to my schedule being a bit packed, I can only take on a limited number of clients in the month of September, and I am looking to work with 2 to 4 people. I do offer single sessions, which are fantastic and I love them, but if you really want to go deep and see shifts, I recommend either the 2 or 4 session packages. It is likely going to fill up very fast. So if you think that you could be in one of those 2 to 4 people that wants to work with me in the month of September, check the description box for the link.
But that was sort of what brought me back into my body from that first part of the experience.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. One thing that you mentioned is that you experienced this activation. Maybe we'll get into this more as you share the aftermath of your experience, but I would love to hear about the effect that that activation had on you. Like, what did that shift in you? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yes, it does make sense. Still integrating that and trying to make sense of what that was. Although when you said activation, all of I went through body tingles, and I just sort of heard my guides sort of be like, we're still letting that unfold for you. So I wish I had a more concrete answer. Is like, before this, I was like that, and now I'm like this. But to be honest, my gifts have felt pretty consistent. I think it was more of, I truly believe that the universe brings us wake-up calls. And I've heard you talk about it in your podcast and with guests as well, that we predetermine all of these things that happen in our life. And sometimes these are pivotal moments. Everything's happening for us. And that sometimes we throw in something really difficult and challenging because that's a moment that pivots our life trajectory and helps us to get either onto our true path or back onto track. And in my case, I felt like I had veered off track. And I was staying in that like wallow wally era and just not making the moves to help others and be on my path. I was just staying stuck for too long. And I think my guides really brought it in as, this is the work that you're doing for yourself. This is what we want you to do with others. But you also need to get out of the self-pity era and move through that healing and take more action. And so I truly believe, and I say that because they've had to come. I've heard it like this. Universe will give you the tap on the shoulder. If you don't turn around and listen, then they'll give you a smack on the back. And if you don't listen, they'll give you a smack across the face. And if that doesn't help, you're going to get the 4x4 that's going to smack you upside the head and really knock you out for a minute. Well, I had a knock yourself out for a minute, period, because after that, I was having some weird health issues. They continued on for a period of time into like some mystery illnesses that we've gotten to the bottom of some of it. A lot of it is still mysteries to the doctors. But I had a moment a couple months ago, maybe almost a year ago, where I was, after COVID, I had been running my for 14 years. And then COVID happened and I got, a regular job, right? In addition to my practice. But I started to feel overwhelmed by that. I leaned more into that. And my guides were bringing me to the edge of, if you don't shift paths and go back to what your purpose work is and help other people with their purpose work, because that's all part of my purpose, then they're going to keep bringing me up into this like near death edge. And I had an experience. We've figured out it's mold poisoning from mycotoxins in a place that I used to live. And this was all around the time that I had this near death experience as well. They were showing me that if I don't change trajectories and get back onto the path that I'm here for, then they're going to keep bringing me up into this edge where I feel like I'm going to die. And I've had a couple moments of that since the near death experience. And last winter, they really hit me hard there because I wasn't taking the action to take what messages and lessons had come from my NDE. I just sort of sat with it and continued on with life instead of taking the bold moves that I was being asked to do to really bring this to the people, support the people, create a space for people to heal their wounds and really step into their power, step into what they're here to create, so that we're not all stuck in these cycles, because that's what we manifest and that's what we get stuck in until we choose to be the cycle breakers and really step into what our soul has come here to do, which is usually not the 9 to 5 and what everybody gets caught up in that rat race and those relationship cycles. We come here with that to heal that so that we can step into what we're really here for. And so I had a couple moments like that where spirit has just brought me up to the edge to be like, are you going to do the thing that we asked you to do? Because only you can do this thing in this way. And we all have this purpose. We all have this unique mentality or thing that we're supposed to create in the world. And if we don't step into that, we don't touch the lives of the people who are really supposed to be transformed through that process. And that's the same for those people. If they don't have that transformation, then they can't step into the thing that's going to touch 100,000 more lives. And so it becomes this waterfall effect that if I don't step into what I'm meant to do, if you weren't stepping into what you're meant to do, then all of these people that need that missing piece that only you can share in one of your programs or your podcast, or that message that needs to go out into the world, then we're not doing the service that we came here to do. And so after my near-death experience, I had 6 weeks of going through medical mishap. The doctors didn't know what was going on. I got all of these medical tests, and I got cleared by one doctor. They said, the test looks so good, we're going to send you home. We had the kayak still on top of the car. And so I told my partner, well, we haven't kayaked for 6 weeks since I had that near-death experience. Do you want to kayak again? Because I love kayaking. So we went kayaking, and then they had like a chapter 2 of that near-death experience unfold over the course of 6 hours on a meandering waterway, where I started to have this like near fainting episode where I started to leave my body. I started to go through all of the feelings that I felt as soon as my ovarian cyst burst, and I was having trouble staying in my body. It was like feeling overwhelmed, hot, cold, going through this like leaving my body stage. And I had 6 hours where we were not anywhere close to the land to get out, where I was being pulled out of my body and seeing myself in the kayaks. And that's when my angels and my guides came, and they said, they said, you started this NDE, by the way, like you did this. So we're just here to finish it. And so my guides had me continue to have these experiences that were out of body while I was connected to the waterways with this message that the work that you started, KRISTEN, while you were on the ancestral waterways, now you're connected to a different waterway, but all of the water of the world is good. So I'm connected to you, Melissa, from wherever, your waterways are. And like all of that is connected because all of the water of the world is interchangeable. It all connects somewhere on the earth. And so they showed me that this was the place that we were there to finish what I started and what they started. And they showed me my ancestor Pocahontas. They showed me my ancestor John Rolfe, and the two men that he had alongside of him, his right and left-hand man, who were basically taking Pocahontas, and she was living with all of them for periods of time, which you probably know what was going on, like some shady shit in the background, right? And so truly my question is, am I really related to John Rolfe? Is it one of these other men who had her? Right. So these men were standing there and their mothers were behind them. And the mothers of these colonizers were crying and saying that they were so disappointed and sad that their sons could rape and pillage and harm the women, this indigenous woman, my ancestor. And their tears were there. And my ancestor, who I met on the other side, Chief Powhatan, he was there, and he said, we have to heal this cycle. And the only way that we heal it is through forgiveness. They said, KRISTEN, will you forgive them? And so there was a forgiveness of them. I do a lot of soul retrieval work. So when someone has a difficult thing that happens in their life and part of their soul feels like it disconnects and leaves, they feel checked out, they feel numb because that part of their soul or heart was broken. My work is to help that part of their soul come back. And so in this case, we had to do a soul retrieval for Pocahontas from the evils that had happened to her when she went back to England, for her tribe, for her people, for her husband, her children that she had previous to being abducted and essentially trafficked in Europe. And so in this sense, we were doing this healing that was not just forgiveness, but calling back the parts of her energy that had left because of that traumatic experience. And as we were doing the soul retrieval, doing this forgiveness, I saw my male ancestors, these colonizer men, and I saw their sadness, and I saw their grief, their shame. And as we forgave it, it was almost like a mending of the timelines and a mending of the ancestral connections on both sides, from their mothers, from, my grandmother's great great grandmothers. And it was a healing that needed to happen so that we could start to shift this energy. And in that, I was getting all of these messages for 6 hours, why I was having all of this anger towards the white man. I went through a period of time. I married a Black man, by the way. He was Caribbean. And I had this mindset of why am I so angry at the white man? And it was all of this and I'm most white, look at me. So having this paradox in me was really this ancestral grief of these two sides of my lineage sort of fighting against each other that needed to come into harmony for forgiveness, for acceptance, for release. And so I realized why I was with someone who was Caribbean descent, why I can still be with someone of a different ethnicity, but still have the same reflections of my ancestral wounds, and that we come together as souls to work through these to really heal. And then they showed me that the man who was with me, who, by the way, saved my life in the first near-death experience, he was the one that kept me from dying, because otherwise I would have drowned. And I was all wet when I came out of that NDE. He had gotten me from the water. He's part Native American and part white as well. So there were all of these messages about why this person now, why it needed to unfold, why this person needed to be with me, and why this needed to be sort of like a 2-part near-death experience healing, because the work that we started there almost felt like it ended abruptly. It felt like I was sort of pulled back before I got all the good, juicy nuggets of wisdom on the other side. But they assured me that we could still have these experiences, but they needed to bring me to this near-death edge, an out-of-body experience, so that I could really hear the messages and get the rest of the healing that otherwise, I think in our rational mind, some of us just rationalize away and aren't able to connect with. And it needed to be so severe as that 2x4, maybe the slap across the face for the second one, so that I would really hear and really listen, because it was an important message that I wasn't meant to just have and then forget and integrate. It was really meant to move mountains with and really step into as part of my purpose to help others with. So
wow, thank you so much for sharing. It's absolutely incredible to me that you had 2 near-death experiences, both times while kayaking.
it was kind of chapter 1 and chapter 2. I kind of was the same one, 6 weeks apart.
That makes sense. Have you been kayaking since then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just checking.
I took a little bit of time off. They had me on a heart monitor and all sorts of things. My heart's fine. They just didn't know what was really going on, because I guess it's not very common for people to have these physiological responses to an ovarian cyst rupture. But and I have to share this part of the story because it's just so wild. So where we were kayaking for the original near-death experience in the Chesapeake Bay area, on the Mattapony River, if anyone's ever been there, a lot of it is residential now. There are steep cliffs that go up through the water, up almost like a mountainside, but not quite a mountain, big hill, big cliffs. And where we were on the water, there was just these giant cliff faces. So there was no place to just get over to the land and roll out onto the land. Instead, what happened was, when I went unconscious, my partner said that all of the color drained from my face. And he knew something was wrong before I even communicated with him that there was an internal rupture. And he said that, once I muttered that I was going to faint, I went out like a light and slumped over to the side. My kayak flipped and I started to go into the water. And he said that he acted very fast. He's a veteran. He's trained very well in these types of things. Unfortunately, he's had to help people who have been on the other side and on this side, but he knew exactly what to do, and it's sort of muscle memory for him. So he got out of his kayak and he said that he thought he was going to fall into the river because the river was quite deep. But instead, he stepped on to the cliff face that was going down into the water. He said that he put his foot onto other sides. This was the only place he could have stepped where there was land to support him, which still blows his mind. We couldn't have reenacted this if we wanted to. And in that moment, his boat floated away. By the way, it had both of our phones in it because he was taking pictures.
Oh, no.
And the kayak went down the river, but he had a fishing line out because he had been fishing, and the fishing line got caught on a fallen tree 100 yards down the quite rushing river. It was moving quite fast. But we were in this one spot where, the kayak went, but then it was suspended on the river and we were able to retrieve it. But he stepped out into the river to get me out of the water. And he said that he thought I was dead for several minutes. Everything was pale. He was checking my vitals. And at one point, he thought I had a seizure. And then my arms went out to the side in the kayak, just like what they did when they activated me. But he said, it looked like a seizure, but they didn't do anything else that goes along with a seizure. But he saw me swing my arms out, thought it was a seizure, but then none of the other common markers were there for it to actually make sense for weeks. He's like, seizures don't happen like that. Then what really happened to you? And so then he was with me. He said he didn't know what was going on. My vitals were gone for a period of time, and then they came back. And then at that point, he was calling me back, and I guess he was massaging my sternum. I was completely soaked in the kayak from the river. Had no idea when I came back. I was completely wet. I had no idea what happened, and didn't even notice that he was rubbing my sternum. But he was doing everything he could to try to bring me back. And so there was just that one little ledge that he stepped out onto that just happened to be the only place that he could step. And the kayaks that went down the river, just his kayak, got stuck just waiting for us. So how crazy is that?
It's absolutely crazy. And it just goes to show that everything is orchestrated to support us, regardless of whether we can always perceive that or not. I would love to hear about your experience after your second NDE. So we left off where you had gone back and gotten all of this information on your ancestry and your purpose. And now you're doing this healing work. And I'd love to hear more about what you do.
Yeah. So I'm not going to lie, coming back from that place of love and light was one of the most challenging integrations I've ever had. Right. I've studied in the jungle, done the plant medicine with the indigenous peoples. When you do integration work from any big trips, right, Burning Man can be an integration. I've been there too. But this was such a hard integration because when you are surrounded by love and there's no pain and it's just connection to consciousness, just holding you and understanding that is so effortless. To come back into a body that feels such levels of grief, loss, and physical pain was really difficult, especially because I was in pain for a very long time. And it's been a long healing journey of integrating that because I wanted to just be on the other side. So there's a lot of that piece of well, why can't I just be done? Why can't I just be over there? But I know a lot of people are given that choice. Do you go back? Are you done? And in this case, they're like, you're not done. You're going back. And so for a period of time, there was a lot of grieving of that space and grieving how to restart because my body, where my heart and my mind were light years ahead of where my physical body was and my limitations that I had. So I still don't have the same muscle mass that I had to be able to put the kayaks on my car myself, because that caused a couple different concerns that I've had that sort of set me back. And while my spirit was wild and ready to do it, my body has been the thing that's reminding me of rest and healing and baby steps. And I think the hardest part was the integration and the knowing that there's something so beautiful there and that we kind of have to create a heaven on earth and do our best. And it's going to be a shadow of what it is on the other side. But it also gives me something to look forward to. So there's no fear of the death. But every time I had those near syncope episodes or felt like I was going to black out, there was always this fear of leaving my body because of how intense that experience was. And I needed to go back and do a soul retrieval for myself where I was hovering above the river, where I believed I was dying and I didn't think that I was coming back. And so it's been a lot of layers of healing and integration. But I can say that I'm at a place where it's just so clear that we don't have a guaranteed tomorrow. If we're here for a reason, why not make that impact right now? And why not make the biggest impact that we can make? Because if we chose to be here in a body to have this experience, we're here on a mission and for a reason. And so that mission has just been magnified for me, that I'm supposed to help other people with their mission and help other people with where they're stuck in these cycles that play out through our relationships, through our ancestry, through where we feel like there's limitations and blind spots, right? I'm trained as a psychotherapist. That was my whole training was in psychology. I have my master's in creative arts therapy. And what I love about shamanic healing and energy healing, specifically the indigenous tools, is that as a therapist, you hold space for someone to talk about a story. And that story is the same thing they bring into therapy week in, week out. But as a healer, I know that that person is telling me a story for a reason, because part of their soul has fragmented and is stuck in that story, or part of their power is trapped there. And the story leads us to where the healing needs to happen. And through the lens of psychotherapy, we can talk circles about it for ages. But if we don't go back to liberate the part of that person's energy, then they never really graduate that story, because they're still going back to the place where they're looking for that piece of themselves. And so if I can help them find that part of themselves and reintegrate it, and if it's a pattern, look at the original wounds of how many generations has this gone back. When in your childhood did this cycle start? Was this a previous lifetime that I didn't believe in until I started working with clients and helping them heal their previous lifetimes, which were healing physical and energetic ailments in this lifetime? So knowing that all of these cycles come into our lives, whether they're inherited and they're intergenerational, or we are carrying over some things that we're still learning from a previous experience in incarnation, or from a childhood wound or a parent's trauma, then we either get stuck in the story and live this very small, limited life when we're meant for more, or we get that part of our power back. And then we have that power to now liberate from us to change the story, right? If like attracts like, and we're attracting similar wounded people and experiences to heal that or become aware of what we need to heal, then if we liberate what was needed to get to become aware of or gleaned from that story, then they graduate onto what they're really here to do, or the next layer of healing. There's usually an onion of layers until they really have the tools and the power that they've retrieved from all of those different places to bring back to self, to give them the power to really step into what they're here to do and to become. And so the work that I do with my clients is to really liberate them from all of those cycles wherever they originate, because we'll find it, so that they can step into who they're really meant to be, liberated from all those layers that were pulling them back like cobwebs into an old storyline. Or like I like to picture it as, we have this tug of war of life where we want to go in one direction, with everything else in our life and our ancestors, these patterns are pulling us back into another direction. Say we want to manifest love and a healthy, happy marriage and relationship and family, but we keep attracting emotionally unavailable partners that can't commit to us. Well, that's pulling us back to a story that has a thread connected somewhere. So how can we pull that forward if it's knotted up somewhere that needs healing? So if we can go back to liberate that story, call back that person's power back to them so that they no longer are hooked into that old thing, pulling them into the past, then they have all this momentum to move forward. And if we liberate the ancestors that are connected to pulling us back to look at this pattern, we haven't healed this yet, please don't run away, we need to heal this first, then we liberate those ancestors that then become on our side of the tug of war game. And then we have guides and wisdom keepers and supporters and cheerleaders and extra brute force to help us move towards our goals, because they're no longer pulling us backwards, they're helping pull us forward. So that's really the work that I want to leave a legacy of, helping people create that soul legacy by healing what past legacies are pulling them back, heal those patterns, and really step into who they're meant to be. Because why else are we here? Why else am I here? I would be on the other side if my guides weren't like, look at these patterns, you're now working on healing them. Now help the people with where they're stuck, because I know what it's like to be stuck there. I know what it's like to feel so sad that I can't move on from something that just wanted my attention for healing. And if I can support people so they don't feel alone when they're being pulled back into all the layers that suck, but they really need to sit with and love and heal, then they are really freed up for what they're here to do and become.
I'm curious how somebody could know if they are needing to do a soul retrieval. Based on what I hear you saying, I could give a guess that maybe it's if they see a pattern continuing to play out in their life that they're just having a hard time correcting on their own. I just want to take a break for a quick moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching and supporting this channel. I could not put out this content without your support. Just watching and commenting and sharing the videos is huge. But you guys ask me consistently if there's anything else that you can do to show your support financially. And there is a way that you can support the channel and also get huge benefit for yourself. I have a community membership called The Sanctuary, which you can join for as little as $10 a month. I created The Sanctuary because people in the spiritual community tend to be very lonely. Oftentimes, people have deconstructed their faith. They've had an NDE or spiritual experience that they're afraid to share with people. And so many of us are looking for that safe space where we can connect with others like us, feel safe to share, and as an added bonus, grow together. And that's exactly what The Sanctuary is designed to be, a safe, supportive space. We have a thriving community. We have courses, mini courses, challenges, meditation soundtracks, and I'm now starting to create energy work infused meditation soundtracks for you to join with me in doing energy work and giving healing to the planet, which is by far my favorite type of content I have ever created in my entire time as a content creator. So join The Sanctuary today to get access to all of my meditations, my new energy work infused meditations, and all the other wonderful resources and people that you will meet in The Sanctuary. Link is in the description box. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Yeah. That's my specialty, is where is there the pattern that's repeating. And it's usually the people that have been like, I've been to therapy, I've done plant medicine work, I have done self-help work, I've done meditation, and they love those people because they have the language, they understand there's a lot of layers, they're very self-aware. And I find that usually those people have really fast tracks to healing because they're just missing that piece of their energy, but they understand the story, they're ready to make peace with it, and they've really wrapped their head around their experience to glean all the lessons and the wisdom. I really believe all these things happen so that we learn lessons. And if we're ready to take everything from it, we're just missing that piece of our vitality, then we're ready to rock and roll on the other side once that's integrated. So I really love that. But it's the same thing as, someone saying, my heart shattered after this breakup, or I felt like when he abandoned me, I abandoned myself, or feeling like you're trying to fill a void with something, whether that's relationships or substances or shopping, whatever that thing is usually an indication that part of us is missing, or part of us is broken, or part of us is shattered, or part of us is self-abandoned. And it's when people use that language. I mean, I hear stories all the time. I'm so into like Reddit posts and people reading their stories about relationships. And sometimes people say, I felt so broken when XYZ. And sometimes people have that storyline that goes with them, but there's one soul shattering experience. That was me. So I've been married twice. My first marriage was to someone who I knew as a pen pal for 8 years before we got married. And we met before we were pen pals. We met in Colonial, West Virginia, not too far from where my near-death experience was at Busch Gardens Amusement Park. Anyway, so me and this person, we were connected for many years. We finally started to date when I was in grad school, with my creative arts therapies degree, when I was finishing that up. And he very quickly wanted to get married and wanted to build a life with me. But because we were a long distance relationship, and when I saw him in person, he was really charming. He was able to say things that, it was like the narcissist and the empath kind of, Beauty and the Beast kind of scenario in this case, where he said a lot of things that weren't true. And I believed all of them because I knew him for so long. We were pen pals for 8 years since we were teenagers. And then here's this experience of he came to the United States, we got married, then he emptied my bank account. And once he took me for everything, then he left the country. And then he started dating other people who then reached out to me. And so I was broken. And in this experience, I remember feeling like a joyful, fun, gleeful person. But then all of a sudden, I just felt like a shell of myself. I was no longer happy, healthy, vibrant. I just felt dead inside. I felt like I once was this amazing, happy person, and then just couldn't even find where to connect with who I was. And I just lied awake in bed in just turmoil, just feeling so broken and just completely empty. And it wasn't until I found shamanism and soul retrieval that energy of me came back into my body. And I was like, oh, this is me again. Like I felt like I was just dropped back into myself again. And after more layers of soul retrieval, because I needed it for my whole childhood, also abuse that happened when I was very, very young, and different layers that I experienced those cycles through my life until I healed that original wound. And it was ancestral too, because it goes back multiple generations, actually to Pocahontas, that I realized that as I started to gather these pieces back, that's when I started. I mean, people say like I'm ageless. Like I just ran into someone from 15 years ago. You look exactly the same, if not younger. And I attribute the youthfulness that I exude to getting all these soul parts back, these childlike, playful parts of myself that left very early on because people could not be trusted. People were harming me and my body when I was a very young child. And to have that experience allow my parts of my soul to leave. There's so many things that happened throughout my childhood that I didn't notice the difference. But when I was in my early 20s and this partner left me and shattered my heart, I could tell you the difference between KRISTEN before that happened and the day after it happened. It was a stark difference. And as an adult, I could say I no longer am the same. But with all of these little fragments that had left early on in life, I didn't realize, because it just became an integration of who I was. I didn't realize I was missing all of these fragments of myself, because truly life gets difficult. Parts of our soul are like, I'm out of here. This sucks. And so they leave. And so in most cases, people go a lifetime without reconnecting with the parts of their trust or their voice or whatever the pieces are that left to protect themselves. They're gone forever until we employ these indigenous ways of pulling back our energy that we've been using for hundreds of thousands of years. If we look at indigenous cultures around the world, this is a core shamanic practice, which means it's been practiced by multiple different indigenous communities worldwide. In those days, we would call back these parts of our soul within days. And instead, we're left with people who have wounds from multiple lifetimes, multiple generations, childhood wounds that are repeating, and they just start to snowball into, why can't I just attract the type of person I want? I'm attracting the type of person that I need to attract to reflect the wound that I still need to heal. And so in this case, it brings us a modality and an ability to connect with the parts of the person's power that left due to those experiences, but are also sometimes the catalyst for those experiences later in life. So I work with the patterns because it's usually not just one thing that happened. We got to go to the core wound to figure out where it started so we can really plug that hole, meaning that we need to call back that person's energy and essence. And sometimes we need to pull some things out of there, right? We started this talking about entities. I find that those dark energies can get connected into where someone's had a wound. So for example, I'm in my early 20s, my ex-partner left and I was shattered and I got sick right away, super sick. Like I was sick for 7 years. I had systemic candidiasis. I had all of these gut issues. I had parasites. I had all of these different things happen that just took away all of my life force and made me sort of this mystery illness person. And it wasn't until I healed the soul wound that we were able to sort of clear the illness that went in there. So shamans believe that if someone has part of their soul that's missing, entities can go into their illnesses. It can make them more susceptible for a spiritual and energetic attack. And in fact, I found out when I was doing my training with the Shipibo people in the Amazon jungle that this was actually a way for people to steal each other's power back in the day. People still do it, right? I see siblings do this to each other a lot, by the way. Family members do it to each other unknowingly, where we covet someone's energy, we try to steal it, and then that makes them weakened to energetic attack. And apparently they've done this with indigenous people, specifically shamans trying to weaken other shamans so that they could be more powerful. It's an ego game with some of the spiritual stuff, I have to say. But I learned that this is something that we acknowledge in all these cultures, but we don't acknowledge it in the Western world. And when someone says they are here because they're jealous, they are having a hard time being present in the relationship, they were betrayed 10 years ago by their ex-spouse, and ever since then they've become jealous. I oftentimes find that there's an energy of jealousy that's not theirs, that was resonating with the frequency of the wound that they experienced and settled into that place, almost like a commiserating friend, right? Those energies can be like, oh, you know what it feels like to have heartbreak. So those energies can sometimes be soul fragments of other people that have crossed over are no longer with their energy, and those energies and those wounds can get stuck in that person's energy field, and we need to pull them out, and then we need to put that person's energy back in, or keep manifesting the same types of experiences, energies externally until they heal that core wound that becomes that magnet for other suffering beings or suffering like experiences like illness and trauma. Heal it is truly that person's power, not just love and light. That's great for a day or two until someone cuts you off in traffic and then that's all gone. But really what we need to plug that in, like our soul puzzle piece that was meant to be there, that left during that betrayal in that relationship, that can then come back to really restore that person's energy so they don't become a magnet for those experiences anymore, because they have what they needed, started that magnetic process. I don't know if I've lost you here, if that makes sense, but that's sort of what I've experienced. And I love talking about this.
I love hearing about it. And yes, it makes complete sense. And as you're explaining this, I'm sitting here thinking about, oh, these are all the times in my life when this probably happened to me. So I've learned a lot from what you've shared here today, and I really, really appreciate it. And I would love for you to share with the viewers where they can find you and how they can work with you.
Yeah, sure. So I have my website. It's theshamanetrix.com. They can also find me at The Shamanatrix on Instagram and on Facebook. My name is KRISTEN Von Fox on Facebook, and you can become my friend there as well. So I really try to work with people who are spiritually attuned. They know that they're here for a bigger purpose. They know that they're meant to make a difference in the world, but they're just trying to figure out how to get these cobwebs of these past patterns off of them so that they can really step into the work that they're here to do. And Spirit brought me back for this purpose, so I got to live it. And, it's when you have these near-death experiences, and I feel like this is the message I want to send home to people, is you will have these experiences that knock you off your feet in not the greatest way if you don't listen to your soul calling. Like some people are called to write that book, or they're called to work with people in some capacity, and they don't necessarily always have all of the next steps of the how, right? That's how we learn and it unfolds, and we don't always get every single step laid out for us. But if we don't listen to that calling, the universe is just going to smack us around. It's that like, pardon my French, but that shit or get off the pot moment. And so I'm really here so that people don't have to get to that level of the 2x4 smacking them across the face. They can really step into that because they know there's a soul calling, so that they don't have to go as far as I've had to get smacked around by the universe, to really step into what they know that they're here to do. They're already born to do it. We just need to uncover all of the layers of everything else that they've brought into this world so that they can step into that. So this work is really initiatory to initiate people into what their soul work is, even if they're not fully clear what that is, but they know that there's a call to create a positive ripple effect in the world, and they don't want to waste time. They know that not every day is promised, and they're ready to really seize that for themselves and for the world and everyone they're about to help.
How are you doing on time? Because I could keep asking questions.
I have time.
Okay, I have 3 more questions. 2 of them are my closing questions, but I have one other one that I want to ask you. How do people know what their calling is? And I'm asking that as somebody who has struggled to figure that out, because there's some things I definitely don't want to do, or I know I'm not meant for, but there's so many things that I do enjoy and I could find purpose in doing and could even be passionate about doing. And I get that question from a lot of people as well. How do I know what my purpose is? Do you have any quick tips for them?
Yeah, I'm going to just share what's coming through really loud and clear right now. So one of my Native American ancestors just yelled really loud, and he said, "It unfolds." Then they showed me this like little old lady, and she's knitting a blanket, and she's bringing this wisdom. Thank you for coming in. She's bringing this wisdom as we don't always know exactly the piece that we're going to create. So in my mind's eye, she's showing me that she had this vision for a blanket that she wanted to knit, and she wanted to knit it out of love to keep others warm. And she knows that she's here to create this thing to keep others warm and to help other people. It's a comforting thing that she's here to create. But she's showing me that as she's creating it, it can take some turns and twists that she didn't expect. And if it was laid out for her, then she wouldn't be learning through that experience that then creates this journey of having something more enriching to provide for someone else, because it's not just point A to point B. You learn this, to help someone with that. Sometimes we have to go on these detours to learn the lessons to integrate into a bigger purpose that unfolds. My guides keeps pointing to the word unfold. And my guides are saying that we're not all meant to just have that dropped into our lap. This is our purpose.
Now I would love to close out by asking you 2 questions that I ask all my guests. And the first one is, that bliss that you experienced in your NDE, is there a way that people can experience that on this side of the veil?
Absolutely. So I teach a lot of shamanic journey work, and anyone that's done shamanic journey work, you don't have to do for me. There's so many different ways to connect in with it. It's an indigenous way of connecting in with your guides. And I find that whenever I go into the journey state, it's like meditation on steroids. We're using the beat of the drum rattles to create a theta brainwave state. And essentially that allows us to drop even more deeply and quickly into that connection with spirit. And I find that when I go into that place and you connect with the guides, they are so full with all of the unconditional love that they just want to pour out to you. And so it's like a coming home when you're in that state, because the guides have so much love for us. They are here cheering us on. I don't think we realize how many positive forces we have around us because we don't see them, and not everyone feels them. But to be able to connect in and carve that space out to really hear the messages and the wisdoms that our ancestors, that our spirit guides have for us, they just bring so much love. It's like we have fangirls and guides on the other realm, and they're just waiting for us to connect in with them. They are waiting desperately, wondering why we're so stuck on our devices. Just why am I on my phone all the time looking at that? Why can't I just be present, right? We have so many distractions that are happening right now, and we have all of our guides that are shouting just as loud energetically for us to put down the devices, connect in, and really hear those wisdoms that we can't find through people online, that we can't find through other people, but we can absolutely find through ourselves. And these are indigenous methods that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and they haven't gone away. We've just forgotten about them. And so if any of you are interested in shamanic journey work, that is an important piece of the work that I do on my retreats, and to help people connect in with that. And if you want to Google shamanic journey work, that's work that you can do. I've had some shamanic journeys on my YouTube channel from ages ago. And so if people want to connect in with that wisdom, I even have an ancestral shamanic journey that's on one of my websites right now, if you're curious about that.
And my final question is, if you could give one message to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
It would be similar to what I shared before, is just to know that you don't have a tomorrow guaranteed. And how can you show up now to be in that state where you're just beaming love and connecting with others, and to not take these moments for granted, your moment with your pet, your moment with your partner, your moment with a friend, and to know that you are here on purpose. Your ancestors chose you to come here now, specifically you. You have been summoned, and that you are here for a greater reason, even bigger than you could know. And that you are the chosen one to be here now within your lineage, and to know that there's more here than what meets the eye, and that your ancestors are cheering you on to find what that is, to really do the work that they couldn't do, right? I think that therapy is now, finally, there's no bad stigma. It's something that, people are looking for in a partner. People are hoping that others find. People are more open to themselves. But if we look at generations back, that wasn't really acceptable. Our ancestors, our parents, they didn't have those same tools that we have now. And to know that when we really allow ourselves to release the stigma of healing all of those layers, to know that we are truly meant for more, and that as we do that work, it does pay off, and it pays off not just for ourselves and what we create in the future, but the 7 generations before and behind for the ancestors that weren't able to do that work. Lean into what you're here for, get curious, connect with your guides. They're always here to bring you that wisdom and at least help you with the next step forward.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support the channel, we have a few fun ways that you can do that. I do have a merch store linked in the description. We've put some of the phrases on t-shirts that you guys requested. I have affiliate links to my favorite blue blockers, my favorite red light panel, and a couple of other companies that I work with. You can join my membership at the Sanctuary. You can sign up for an energy healing. I also offer a 4-session energy healing package. You'll find all these links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.